Hi guys, welcome to this post-fight analysis, and this one is of UFC 239. Lots of stuff happened, some interesting fights. I'm going to cover mainly the main card because I think that's what most people want to hear about. Um, some fights will be a little bit more extensive in the analysis, and others not so much. So first one right away, Michael Chiesa, he defeated Diego Sanchez. Not much to say about that one. I mean, Michael pretty much did whatever he wanted with Diego, and to Diego's credit, he managed to escape being finished. But I think it's really clear that Michael Chiesa just dominated him on the ground, and there wasn't much that Diego could do about it. I mean, he hung in there, and he's experienced and all that, but it's clear that he was no match for Chiesa, and I think he's 37. If you get dominated like that from beginning to the end of the fight by a guy who's on the way up, then I think Diego seriously needs to consider retirement while he's still able to be more or less in decent health, so to speak, and not take too much damage from some of the guys that he will face if he stays in the fight game. The guys that are coming up that are a lot younger than he is, and so on. So this is difficult. Being an ex-competitor myself, I'm 47 right now, so I still want to compete, but it's no longer in the cards for me. So you have to know when to walk away. It's very difficult, and I think Diego's time has come now. Some of you will say, obviously, sure, Chiesa's bigger and so on. But still, despite that, I mean, Diego is one of the most experienced guys in the UFC. So, and he didn't have an answer at all during all those rounds. So good for Michael Chiesa, good performance. Not much to say about that, other than see what no idea what's going to be next for him. That'll be interesting to see. But very sad for Diego. I kind of like him as a fighter. Seems like a really stand-up guy. He's gritty. He pulls through and so on. Had a couple of good fights recently as well. But it's just I think he's coming at a point in his career where maybe he should consider retirement. Um, Tough to say these kind of things, but I can only call him the way I see him. So that's it. So moving on to the next one, light heavyweight, that was Jan Blachowicz against Luke Rockhold. I was a little bit anticipating this fight just to see how Luke would do now that he moved up to light heavyweight. He's been saying on and on about how the weight cut was so horrible for him, and given his body type, I can imagine that must have been really, really difficult. But he kind of looked bad from the get-go. I got the impression that his back leg was injured from the beginning. So he had this weird sleeve, and I know he's had surgery on his shin and skin grafts and all that, and looked like there were a bunch of that was taped together. I don't know what the deal was, but it's clear there's still some issues with his left leg. But just the way he moved, it was beyond just the issue with the shin. It looked like there was something off. So that was the first thing. And then the second one is, well, he seemed to gas pretty quickly in the sense that he was by far not as dynamic that he has been in the past. And this despite having gone up in the weight class and claiming that he was feeling fine and great and he didn't have to cut any weight like he didn't have to cut weight like he did before, and that he had a lot more energy and all of that kind of talk, and that just didn't materialize in the cage. So I was a little bit disappointed with that. Some things were confirmed. So first off, his defense just isn't good enough at the level of firepower that the light heavyweights have. I mean, defense was never really the strong suit of Luke Rockhold to begin with, but now he's facing bigger guys and they hit harder, and one punch can be enough, as we saw. So that brings me to the next point. He's had three pretty heavy knockouts that he suffered in his last four fights, and I think it's maybe a little bit too early to say, but it looks like his chin is gone. So, for those of you who don't know about this, this idea is that you can always take punches and so on and keep going no matter what, and take knockouts and just get back up again and be fine. The old Rocky movies kind of promoted that idea. It's not true. We know now that every single punch that you get to the head causes damage that takes a very long time to recover from, and sometimes you don't. So, and it's one of the things that you see that guys who take in enormous beatings in the ring, or really heavy knockouts, and then you see them come back and they're fine. And then all of a sudden it's like one fight too much, and then the chin is gone. Um, as far as we know right now, with the way that medical science is looking at it, that's what seems to be the case, is that just it's not just the accumulation of small punches that knocks you out, it's that every single punch does damage. And then eventually you get to a point where you just can't take the hits anymore. And I think I hesitate a little bit because I mean, the first it was the high kick that Blachowicz nailed Rockhold with over the top of the head, and that was a pretty good power kick. So it's not surprising to be dropped like that. Also, the way he got dropped is that he was spinning around, and instead of creating distance, which is what you should do, if you end up spinning around and having your back exposed, don't just do what Luke did, is that he just spun around and immediately stood his ground and faced his opponent, who by then is obviously doing whatever he wants. It's same thing. Sarah McMahon against Amanda Nunes. Same thing. She missed with a leg kick and she just spun around, and Amanda just nailed her coming in with his big right hand, if I'm not mistaken. And it just because when you're allowed to attack somebody who has his back towards you, as in MMA, not so much in other sports, combat sports, but in MMA that's not an issue. So you don't turn your back, and if you do turn your back, you need to get out of there. And Luke just didn't do that. So anyway, back to the chin issue. The reason I mentioned that is that first kick nailed him really well. He was dazed, but it seemed to recover a little bit. And in the second round, then he did the elbow drag slash break, and he spun away all the way. In this kind of technique is that it's tricky if you use it. But if you use it correctly, you can actually damage the guy's arm tremendously to actually end the fight. And if you don't, you need to move him, and that didn't happen. Blachowicz wasn't dragged along because of the technique that Luke did. So Luke just turned away from his opponent and then turned back towards him, and that's when he got nailed with that shot. So again, it's just a tactical mistake. It's very easy to make. Everybody, not blaming anybody, just pointing out the danger in that technique. The result is that, and he was just clocked and he was out. You can see that he was clearly out. That was a very heavy knockout again. So, if his chin isn't gone, maybe the next knockout will definitely take it away. And now we're talking brain damage. He's 34. The title shot is really far off now. It's farther off than ever. So I don't see if he's going to get one anytime soon. He has no claim to fight anybody, except maybe Whiteman again. But I don't know how that's going to go. So my impression is that Luke Rockhold is kind of going to be the Jérôme Le Banner of MMA. So if you know Jérôme Le Banner, he's a French K1 kickboxing fighter who is one of the best of his generation. But he was a great offensive fighter, and he had a tremendous physical advantage. He was built like a Greek god, and if you like, he had really strong physical assets that he could use with his raw power and strength, and despite his size, big strong guy, but he moved really well, very flexible. So he had a lot of tools in his toolkit that he could use, and mostly he used it by being very aggressive and attacking. Now, and in many cases, being aggressive and offensive works, but that tends to, and I think this is the case with Rockhold as well, that physicality and that aggression can cover up some fundamental flaws that you have in your defense in particular, but also in offense. And you can get away with that because of those physical traits and explosiveness and the speed and the power and so on. Kind of like we see with Francis Ngannou. He hits so hard. Ask Junior Dos Santos. That one touch, and even just a glancing blow knocks you out. Yep, there are glaring holes in his technical repertoire, as Stipe clearly demonstrated. And I think the same thing happened with Luke, is that has really tremendous potential, and it never really came out, kind of like with Jérôme Le Banner. is that the guy, he never became K1 champion. He always like was just second best, which is pretty damn good if you look at the caliber of guys who eventually ended up winning. But just kind of a wasted potential. That's the impression that I'm getting from Luke Rockhold. Is, and also he gave the impression of never taking his opponents seriously. He was always very, sometimes bordering on arrogant in the way that he treated his opponents in during the fight. Not talking about press stuff and so on, and talking trash, but just during the fight, didn't seem to be taking them seriously as a threat, being overly confident in his offense and his strength and so on. And this is by finding guys who have a pretty decent track record. So again, I think maybe he should consider retiring too. I think if he isn't suffering from brain damage, he's going to be really, really close to it. And then another knockout could have devastating results. So he's got apparently a really good modeling career going. If I were him, I'd go with that, make lots of money, and not get punched in the face for a living. So a little bit of a disappointing fight. Good for Blachowicz. He did what he needed to do, but again, Rockhold, a little bit sad to see how it goes. But again, 34. Maybe it's time to start rethinking life choices. Then moving on to the next one. Let me see. So we had Masvidal against Ben Askren. Obviously, Jorge was very psyched to get his hands on Ben. What a tremendous mistake by Ben Askren. I mean, you see a guy sprinting right at you. I mean, Masvidal, he set it up well. It didn't look like he was going to accelerate like that, but he suddenly starts sprinting. I mean, just he goes on a dead run. And what does Ben Askren do? He leans forward for a takedown. You do not try to take somebody down who sprints at you at that speed. I mean, that's a head-on collision. Don't do that. Get out the way, make it a glancing blow, whatever. But don't just try to take a guy down like that. So I mean, very well done by Masvidal. He made a statement clearly, and people were complaining about the two punches he threw afterwards. But those are the rules. I mean, he fights until either he can't fight anymore, and he's knocked out, or he knocks the other guy out, or the referee stops the fight. That's pretty much it. The referee didn't stop the fight, so you keep on going because. I mean, more than one fighter lost a fight because he thought that, the guy was done and he backed off, walk away, knockout, right? I'm good. But the referee didn't stop it and the guy actually seemed to be recovering. And his opponent came back and eventually beat him. So you don't take chances at that level. And it's a full contact sport. I mean, it's it's a rough sport. What can I say? So I would say Masvidal, he deserves a title shot, especially given his previous fight as well. Really well done. Give him Usman. Don't know how Usman's going to do because he's apparently in pretty bad physical shape. So we'll see when and if that happens. But I would say Masvidal, give the guy a title shot. He's earned it. And then moving on to women's bantamweight, Amanda Nunes defeating Holly Holm. I thought Holly looked quite good, especially in the beginning. She was a lot less heavy on her lead foot, which is typically what she does, and which I think is a huge problem for her. Because usually she's so overcommitted on that lead leg and leaning slightly forward, exposing her head and so on. But also it stops her from developing power, and it also stops her from using certain types of footwork. So I think it's a disservice, but that's up to her coaches and her. I'm sure they're aware of the pros and cons. But she didn't do it as much, which gave me the impression that she was actually very cognizant of the fact that Amanda has knockout power. With one punch, she can knock you out. So she kept more of a balanced stance, 50-50 stance with her weight, and kept her head more upright, which I thought was a good move. I didn't expect it to happen, but it was a good move because she's pretty much never done that before in MMA. Anyway, beginning of the round was really excellent. I liked the footwork, great footwork by both of them. The step drag footwork going inch by inch. as opposed to the lumbering big full steps and shifting steps that a lot of guys take. And this is the hallmark of the experienced and well-trained striker, is that they measure distance by inches or less than that, as opposed to by feet. Um, and you could see that if you rewatch the fight, you'll see clearly is that they constantly control the distance by making these really small adjustments with the footwork and trying to control critical distance, which is once you cross that, then you're in striking range, and work with that. Now about knockout, right before the knockout, Amanda hit Holly kind of with a right hand, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't wasn't a full hit, but might have stung her. And it was immediately afterwards, like a second or two afterwards, Holly hit. She throws a left hand, and she then overcommits to like a head evasion movement because she thinks Amanda's going to counter. And Amanda pulls that counter, and you can see that Holly has this big diagonally backwards leaning movement with her head, and she's kind of stuck there. She kind of hesitates. She stays in that position, and then she raises her leg for a side kick, looks like a side kick, but she hesitates again. Now, because of both these hesitations, she's got nowhere to go, and she's basically a heavy bag for Amanda to knock her out on, and kind of sharpen her shins on, which is, I mean, that the high kick was perfectly executed, well timed, perfectly placed, and the fight was over. So I think it's those two hesitations that cost her tremendously. Again, freeze frame it right before Amanda throws the kick, and you'll see that Holly's in this awkward leaning on one leg, having one leg half raised for a side kick, leaning a little bit off to the side, and she's kind of frozen there for a second or so, and then she eventually she throws it, but Amanda's already coming in with that kick. So I don't know. I would very much like to see that fight again. I think it could be. I don't think Holly's going to get it, but I think she deserves to. I mean, it was an interesting fight. Just one small mistake, and obviously a striker of the caliber of Amanda Nunes is just going to capitalize on a mistake like that, the way she did. So I don't know. As a fan, I would like to see that fight again. See what happens if they maybe go a little bit longer. But you know, all respect to Amanda Nunes. She's a champ for good reason. One of the best strikers out there. She fought very smart. Well done. That kick was awesome. Not much more to say about that. And then we get to the final one, John Jones versus Thiago Santos. I don't know. Kind of mixed feelings about this one. John Jones looked uninterested. It looked like, especially in the first round, it reminded me of his fight against Auvin Saint-Preux, where that was the first time after his layoff, after his suspension. He came back and he was like, just coasting and just doing his thing, but never really trying to push it, never trying to finish it, being very, very careful, overly careful, very hesitant, waiting to see what happens and so on. And like not motivated to go after his opponent. So that was my overall impression, and I think that again, I'll get to my opinion about the result in the end, but I think he was being very risky there, coasting, especially in the last round as well, just taking his sweet time to do stuff. Because for me, I don't think that he should have been confident that he would get the win there. So anyway, something else in the first round, he looked injured to me. He moved slow and awkward, so that could have been on purpose. Sometimes fighters do that, is that they slow down on purpose to set the pattern for you, set the speed, and that you kind of get lulled into complacency, thinking that they're going to be slow, and then they speed up. But in the later rounds, I mean, you could see that John was moving better, but still, I don't know, he moved very sloppy at times. For instance, he did a jump spinning back kick. He totally missed with that one, and he was way off balance. It looked very, very clumsy. So maybe he was injured to begin with. I don't know. But, to quote Georges St-Pierre, I was not impressed with your performance. So he wasn't doing all that great. Santos was doing extremely well. I was very much surprised with the way he fought, because usually he's this brawler. He hits tremendously hard with punches and kicks. and he rushes people and goes nuts on them. But he was very cautious, very smart, showed some pretty decent footwork. He didn't stand still in the same spot too much to let Jones tee off on him. He also did a few rushes in that first round that Jones was quite lucky to backpedal from. So I was impressed. I didn't expect that. I thought that he was going to do his crazy wild man, caveman style of rushing forward and just trying to nail people with shots. He didn't. So very impressive. I'd love to see more of that. He still has his tremendous power and explosiveness. So if he becomes a little bit more of a tactician, he could be really a force to be reckoned with. Um, until he destroyed his own knee, obviously. Now, um, I give a breakdown on that with pictures and drawing arrows and all that stuff on the Facebook page. So you go to facebook.com/MMA Formula, you can find it. Um, so here's what happened. Thiago starts with a typical fighting stance, so it's fine. And then he steps in and he throws the half hip leg kick. So the hip moves a little bit, his right hip in this case, but not much. So if you look at it, you can see that he keeps that hip pulled back fairly, quite a bit. And the other part of that is that he does soccer style, which means that his kicking knee is bent at a more than 90-degree angle, which is what soccer players do when they do like a penalty kick or so on. That is not proper leg kicking technique in general. It's not typically how it's done. Now, that's the way he launches the kick. Now, Jones retracts his leg and the kick misses. Now, if you look again, go frame by frame if you watch the video or look at the pictures on my Facebook page, you see that Thiago's hip is still pulled back. It hardly rotated. But he's a strong guy, he's very explosive. So he's going all out in that kick. And as he misses, that leg has maximum speed and it misses the target because Jones pulls his leg back. Now, and then inertia takes over. It's just pure physics. His body is putting tremendous amount of effort in bringing that leg forward in an arc. He misses the impact that he thought he was going to get, and that leg keeps on swinging. Now, because he planned, and again, his hip is still pulled back. That's a key point. So that means that a lot of power is going into that swinging motion. Then his whole body will want to rotate because of inertia. And what does he do? Well, he tries to compensate a little bit, if you watch it, by bending that leg as it misses, but it's way too late because his whole body wants to rotate and he's planting his support foot. So his foot and his knee and his shin bone are not moving. Everything on top of that is rotating towards his left side. Well, if the foot and the shin bone and the fibula aren't moving, what can move? Then it's the upper leg. And that's going to just destroy the knee. So that kind of rotation, if you don't pivot your foot like that, it puts tremendous shearing forces on the knee. And in this case, you can see, if you watch the close-up and if you watch the photos, the pictures that I make, I do a close-up of that. You can see that his shin bone just pops out for a second. That's when all the ligaments are getting torn off. So yeah, that's not good. I mean, I don't think the soccer style half hip leg kick is a good idea. Again, you guys know I wrote a book about the leg kick, so you can look that up on Amazon and you'll find it. But you can use the half hip, but it's used for speed and precision. You don't use the half hip for full penetrating power. It's the wrong type of impact. You can obviously, I mean, you can do it. That's not the issue. But the problem is that there are inherent risks. And one of them is that you just blow out your knee, especially if you kick the way that Santos kicks so hard. He's all in, he's committed, throws everything in the kitchen sink in that kick. Oh, okay, yeah, your knee can't take it if you don't pivot. If you again watch a soccer player take a penalty, you'll see if they do it slow, they'll do it kind of like Santos did. The hip stays back and the leg goes forward, and they sink a little bit into the support leg. If they start running, what you'll see them do is they will launch the kick in a very similar manner the way he did, but after they kick the ball, they would jump up on the support foot, and that takes the pressure off that knee. So do this bizarre little hop, jumping type thing to take the pressure off the knee. Well, there you have it. You see it from a different sport. they have a similar motion, and then it's very different. They know how to not blow their knee out just doing a basic penalty kick. So again, pivot on the support foot, put it already at an angle to begin with, and if you don't, if you want to keep it planted, fine, but don't drive through, because I mean, Santos is going to be out for about 7 to 8 months, is what I read. It's not surprising. I mean, he tore everything. It's going to be extensive surgery. It's going to be a lot of rehab, and then it's going to take quite a bit of time for that knee and the ligaments to become strong enough to take the type of training that he does and take the impacts. Because guess what everybody's going to try to do next when they fight him? They're going to kick that knee. They're going to leg kick and side kick that knee. So we'll see. That said, despite all that, he gave Jones a lot of trouble. He was half crippled, and still Jones couldn't finish it or couldn't put. Santos was never really in big trouble. Had a couple tense moments, but Jones never really put him with his back against the cage and started messing him up. Not really. And if you look at after the fight, Jones was supported by 2 people to get out of the cage, and he had this huge welt on the inside of his leg. So what would have happened if Thiago hadn't messed up his knee? We'll never know. So my impression is that once Thiago Santos is fully recovered, I hope he learns from this and keeps going the path of being a more tactical and smart and cautious fighter as opposed to the wild man that he was before. Because I think he has a lot more potential than I originally thought, so that's fine. We'll see how and when he returns, but I hope he does. As for Jones, again, I get the impression that he's just, resting on his laurels and coasting on his talent and experience. I'm not sure how long that's going to stick, because this is the thing. Every other light heavyweight saw this fight as well. What did they see? An uninterested Jones who couldn't finish off a guy who was pretty much at his mercy if he wanted that. And despite that, Santos managed to hurt him pretty bad with the leg kicks, inside leg kicks, and so on. So bad that Jones was limping and needed to be carried out of the cage. So that air of invulnerability is broken, in my opinion. So I think that a lot of light heavyweights are looking at Jones like, okay, if Santos, who doesn't have the track record of a very technical fighter, to put it mildly, if he can do that to Jones, a lot of guys are thinking now, I can do that too. And that is very dangerous, because Jones has this air of invincibility around him. And that's degrading. That's crumbling a little bit. So we'll see how his next fight goes. No idea what will happen, but I think this might be in the long run a bad thing for Jones. Now, as for the results, I think that a draw would have been okay. I would personally think that maybe Santos would have deserved the win too, but just giving it to Jones, I don't think he deserved that. I disagree with the decision. It is what it is, but I don't think it's a perfect decision. That said, give him a rematch. It's the first time that Jones was really in trouble in a long time, or trouble in that somebody managed to hurt him and make it difficult for him, and he was only using one leg. So give him a rematch. I'm sure Santos will be up for it. So that's it. That's just my take on things. If you have comments, feel free to leave them. If you want to help out, share this video and subscribe obviously to the channel. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.